Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating analytical framework of the Hamas Israel conflict, drawn directly from a presentation by Dr. M. Rajesh. We're going to see how this analysis bridges some massive chronological gaps. We are talking about connecting antiquity all the way to 20th century treaties and then linking it all to ancient Indian political theory. Just to map out this highly complex modern geopolitical crisis. It's a lot to cover, but it's incredibly insightful.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. Historical roots. 2. The Balfour Agreement. 3. Shifting borders. 4. The current conflict. 5. The Saptanga theory. And finally, 6. Implications and perceptions.
Starting us off, Section 1. Historical roots. To really understand this modern crisis, Dr. Rajesh's analysis spans 3 completely distinct eras. It begins centuries before Christ to establish that deep, ancient footprint, then fast-forwards all the way to 1917 to mark the diplomatic catalyst of the Balfour Agreement, and finally lands right in contemporary history, from 1947 to today. The presentation essentially suggests that the headlines you read today are inextricably linked to both those ancient foundations and those early 20th century declarations.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Balfour Agreement.
Now, what's really interesting about this next piece is that we are looking at primary source material. It's a typewritten letter from the British Foreign Office dated November 2, 1917, addressed to Lord Rothschild. The presentation heavily emphasizes this specific document as the major diplomatic catalyst for how the 20th century borders were drawn into region.
If we extract the absolutely critical sentence from that letter, it reads, "His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people." The presentation highlights this exact phrasing as the foundational declaration of British support at that specific time in history.
Which brings us to Section 3, Shifting Borders.
Cartography tells its own powerful story, doesn't it? Tracking the rapid geographic evolution of the region over just a few short decades is pretty eye-opening. Starting with the pre-partition landscape in 1947, we immediately transition into the proposed shifts of the UN partition plan. From there, we see the newly drawn lines between 1949 and 1967, which ultimately leads us directly to the present-day configuration. The source uses this timeline to visually underscore just how dynamic the territorial reality on the ground has been.
And that leads right into Section 4, the current conflict.
To analyze what's happening present day, the presentation introduces 2 very distinct frameworks of inquiry. First, the specific organizational history of Hamas, and second, the broader, overarching Hamas Israel conflict. By actively separating these 2 things, the analysis attempts to untangle the specific actions of localized actors from the much wider state-to-state geopolitical friction. It's a really crucial distinction to make.
Now for a fascinating intellectual pivot. Section 5. The Saptanga theory.
And this brilliantly illustrates how ancient frameworks can apply today. Dr. Rajesh maps this modern conflict using Kautilya's ancient Saptanga theory. This is an ancient Indian treatise on statecraft that basically divides a state into 7 essential limbs: the ruler, the ministers, the population, fortifications, the treasury, the army, and allies. So rather than just looking at this as a standard modern war, the presentation asks us to evaluate the actors through this specific ancient matrix. You have to ask, are their fortifications, their durga, secure? Is their kosa, their treasury, robust enough to actually sustain a long conflict? Who holds the ultimate advantage in mitra, or international allies? It literally deconstructs complex modern warfare into an ancient checklist of state survival.
Zooming out for our final segment, Section 6, Implications and Perceptions.
The analysis makes it a point to highlight that regional conflicts are deeply filtered through international lenses. Specifically, it looks at the political perception from India's vantage point. Observing this conflict requires balancing historical ties alongside modern strategic partnerships. It really shows how domestic perceptions and politics directly inform a nation's official diplomatic stance on the global stage.
So what does this all mean? What is the broader implication of taking ancient statecraft and applying it to a modern crisis? Well, it suggests that while the weapons and the maps change, we go from 1917 paper agreements to present-day borders, the fundamental mechanics of territory, treasury, and alliances, they really don't change at all. It leaves us to ponder something pretty huge. Is history just a timeline of shifting borders, or is it actually a continuous cycle of these 7 ancient elements constantly vying for balance?
And that officially wraps up our explainer on Dr. Rajesh's analysis. Thank you so much for joining me.
It is a powerful reminder of how historical documents and ancient theories can literally serve as blueprints for understanding the headlines we see today. Keep questioning the frameworks behind the news, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.